Welcome, everybody, to the CFF List Waiver Watch lineup draft for week 2. I'm Jay Mill. I got my partner, Willie B, as usual. We're joined today by Chasing the Natty and C2C's own Jared Palmgren, the crown prince of CFF, and Dorian Miller, former all-star Rutgers O-lineman. How's everybody doing today?
I'm doing good. I don't know about Crown Prince of CFF over here. I'm like, you make me blush a little harder every time you bring me onto the show, Jay Mill.
Yeah, well, if John Lobb's the Godfather or the King, I figure, you could be the crown prince.
Okay, I can maybe kind of see that. I'm like the prince that everybody's like, I'm not ruling yet, but I'm
Right, you're
everybody's
next
like,
in line. You're next in line for the throne.
gotcha. Okay, that makes a bit more sense.
All right. Everybody, it's not quite noon. We are up in the morning doing this. Uh, we had a super late night, more really late games than I can ever remember. We had 5 games going up until 1:30 Eastern time in the morning, since we had 5 games starting at 10:30 Eastern or 11, which was crazy. Um, a quick poll: who stayed up till the very end of all the games?
I tried.
I
Yeah,
tried.
it was tough. It was tough.
I didn't even try. We went to Norman, and then
Yeah, Willie was
that
at
took
the
a lot of out of me. So no, I didn't even try.
Okay, all right, that's
Man,
fine.
I'm not in mid-season form at all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The problem was, like, I fell asleep on my couch, and then I woke up right about 1:30 in the morning, and then I went to go to bed, and then I couldn't fall back asleep until like another hour later, and that just ticked me
Yeah.
off.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
unfortunate. There.
I pushed through to the end. I did most of my homework, around halftime of those late games. Took time to take my notes in because I didn't want to be scrambling this morning. But I hope the rest of you found some time to get some work in this morning. To everyone viewing, the purpose of the Waiver Watch draft is to give you advice not only on who to pick up, but who to pick up that will make the biggest impact for you specifically this week immediately. So we are looking at players that we think will have the best games next week, week 2 right now. So the stipulation is they have to be rostered on under 30% of teams. We're assuming that's a low enough number that they'll be readily available in several leagues. A lot of times we'll find guys, especially early, that are drafted in under 5% of leagues that will certainly be available even in dynasty leagues to help you guys out. But again, while we are looking for long-term help to assist you guys, we're competing with each other to try to get the highest score for this week. So if you've got a problem that you need to fix quickly, this is the show to watch for guys that will help you now, we hope. The typical goal is we're looking for quarterbacks that are going to at least get you 20 points, running backs and receivers that are going to get you 15, and a tight end that can hopefully break out and get you 10, but if not, maybe 8 or 9. This early in the season, hopefully there's some double-digit tight end guys available. Certainly seems like there are guys that I knew nothing about. We'll talk about that when we get there. But before we do that, anything stand out from yesterday, or how excited were you? Your general thoughts, Dorian. We'll go to you first. What stood out to you yesterday?
Yeah, I mean, I going into this season, I've been, I'm just really excited to watch Kansas State and super big on Avery Johnson, but I guess his defense, Kansas State's defense, really kind of was a little disappointing yesterday. So it was interesting to see them in a back and forth with North Dakota. I know I don't know. I mean, I know it's a North Dakota FCS program. 100% sure of the history, but I would imagine they're not terrible given the rest of the FCS teams in that region. But at the same time, I mean, I'm just, I was hoping for a Heisman type of season for him. And while he's putting up great numbers on paper, obviously it'd be pretty tough to make a case for that at this point, based on the way the season's gone. But that was pretty shocking to see. Yeah.
Yeah, Willie, what about you? I know you were live watching Oklahoma. Anything on that game or some other thoughts?
I know that they hold a lot back. Usually that week 1, I'm going to be very interested to see what this offensive line can do this week. I didn't see enough, so I'm hoping that they did hold back. But if that line shows me what it did yesterday, there's going to be some trouble. I'll just say that.
And you're referring to the big Michigan-Oklahoma matchup next week. Gotcha.
That's correct.
And Jared, what about you? Just kind of general thoughts on yesterday, or anything crazy that stood out, or otherwise?
The word that comes to mind is rust. I think something that we always have to be careful of early on in the season is that the offenses that we're seeing this week aren't necessarily what we're going to see here in a couple of weeks. There's a lot of teams that, things look good in practice. It's a whole different game once they're actually out there on the field, and things aren't clicking. We make a lot of generalizations here. Again, there's a lot of players we could talk about here today. A lot of guys that stood out yesterday. The connections that are going to define our CFF leagues down the line, the workhorse roles, the target shares, the carry shares, like all these things that we're trying to make guesses on here in week one really aren't probably going to be solidified until the next couple of weeks. And then from there, especially once we get into conference play, that's when things are going to really start making a lot more sense. So we'll talk about a lot of players here today, but I do think that everybody should keep in mind that there's so many players that looked great last week. I specifically am looking at wide receivers. There's a lot of wide receivers that performed really well that are available everywhere this week. I would almost guarantee half of them you're probably going to drop after like 3 or 4 weeks, because this is their one big week, and then things kind of fall apart from there. Hopefully we can sift through and figure out who's actually worth it this week.
Right, which is a good chance. So instead of waiting till the end, let's plug Chasing the Natty, because I know you do a very relevant segment based on what you just said in terms of waiver pickups that you should not get. You want to give a plug for that show that you do, the waiver bus. I forget what you call it specifically. The guys that kind of give you false hope that are the big waiver guys that people are looking at.
Yeah, so again, in my weekly waiver show, one of the first segments I always do is what I call waiver wire traps, and these are guys that, if you're just going to your players tab and you're looking at who scored the highest, and that's how you're basing your decisions of who to pick up each week, there are guys there that scored a ton of points this past week that probably down the line aren't going to help you out a lot. And like, I've got 4 out of the 5 I'll discuss today. 4 or 3 of them are running backs. There's a couple of running backs that scored a ton of touchdowns on very few carries this past week, so I'll warn people against that. Receivers, though, man, again, as I said, there's a lot of them, and there's warts with a lot of them, but it's hard for me to say like that any of them are definitively not going to help you down the line. Like, they all have things that are nice. There's good target share, there's good volume, there's good efficiency, but there's very few that have all of those. But there's not any really that have enough warts for me to say, yeah, they're a definite trap this week.
All right.
So.
Well, we don't want to give up too many spoilers for your own show, but feel free, if any of us draft a waiver trap guy, to call us out and let us know live today.
And not all of mine, Jared.
Yeah,
I tend to be pretty bad about that, don't I, Willie?
Yeah. All right. Well, again, we use the randomizer here. We'll get the draft going. We do a snake one time. So Willie B will get 2 picks, and then we'll go back to Jared and Dorian and me, but we won't snake when it comes back to me. We have too few people for that to be worthwhile. So I'm fortunate enough to get us kicked off. I don't think it's the best spot to be here. I think maybe Willie's got the best spot on the turn here to be able to get back to back. But I'm going to get us going. And as Jared mentioned, there were some pretty amazing target numbers out there. So there were guys with like 15 and 18 targets this week, which was crazy at receiver. And again, looking at the points could be a little deceiving, because some of these guys that got a ton of targets didn't necessarily get a touchdown. So I'm looking at a guy as the first pick that produced a really good amount of points without a touchdown. He's one of those guys that had a lot of targets. I feel like he's going to continue to get a lot. It wasn't real clear what was going to happen at Baylor as far as Sawyer Robertson's number 1 guy, but I'm going to put a few chips in here on Cole Wilson, the wide receiver from Baylor, as my first pick. He's 10% rostered. He's got good matchups, I think, for the next 2 weeks, maybe 3. He's got SMU this week, which I think, they could get in a little bit of a back-and-forth offensive battle there with SMU, which is exactly what you want. And then he's got Samford in week 2. So you're getting a little bit of a bonus if you can get Cole Wilson this week, I think. He's got SMU followed by Samford, and then Arizona State, which they could potentially, again, be forced to just be throwing the heck out of the ball against Arizona State. So that's my number 1 pick, to kick the draft off. What do you got, Jared?
I got two quick comments. One, it is Cole with a K
Right.
on the graphic there, and then two, this is gonna sound like a backhanded compliment, and I promise that it is not. I tend to be mean on this show. I had like 25 wide receivers listed on my show this morning as guys that I could potentially talk about for my waiver show, and Cole Wilson actually didn't even make that list. But here's the thing: I still think it's a relatively good pick here.
Okay.
One. Good. I think a lot like that tells you just how deep I think wide receiver is in terms of the waiver wire this week. There's just a ton of great options that you could go with this week and just take your shot on, like you said, Jeremy. Like if Josh Cameron's going to be locked up by every Baylor or every defense Baylor's facing week in and week out, Cole Wilson's going to feast. They're not going to have enough guys to cover both him and Cameron.
Yep.
So they got a good matchup this week.
Yeah, and again, the great thing about week one to me, like I have the most fun like in the days preceding Saturday and even the Thursday and Friday games, because it's just so much fun for those of us who have spent hours and hours trying to just make guesses, educated guesses at like who are the real targets going to be, who's the real running back one, who's the real wide receiver 1 and 2. And we had some big mysteries this week with guys that didn't even get carries, or maybe got one carry that were supposedly the running back one according to the coaching staff, which we can talk about later. But I love the way everything plays out, and you get a lot of your questions answered in week one. That's the funnest part to me. And this, again, was one of those teams where you didn't quite know who exactly was going to be targeted the most. But I like the fact that, Cole Wilson got those 12. Because if he got 12 today or yesterday, you can't see that really going below maybe 6 or 7 in other games. So I think he'll be there. As a guy to keep for the season. With that, Dorian, I've stalled enough. Do you have a pick ready?
Yeah, I do. It was a guy. So in one of my leagues, our best ball league, he got sniped, or somebody took him right before I was going to take him. I'm going to go with Chris Durr from Wyoming.
Okay.
I just saw some local media coverage on the guy during the off season last year. In his first season in Wyoming, put up modest numbers, nothing too crazy, but enough for me to be interested in what he was going to do. And then obviously week one, came out and had 8 catches for 190 yards and a TD. They have Northern Iowa coming up next week. I mean, once again, not a pushover FCS program like we talked about in the beginning, but I'm willing to take my chances on him after playing the way he did this past week. I think he's a guy. He's rostered in 9% of leagues. I think if depending on your situation, I feel like this is somebody you could plug in and be confident in. Smaller receiver, honestly, didn't get to see too much, and it didn't get to see the game itself, but based on numbers and based on the kind of the preseason coverage that was being done on him, I feel like he's going to be a guy that could be beneficial for you.
Yeah, and the 10 targets is another good barometer there. Any guy getting double-digit targets this week is somebody you would hope is not putting up fluky numbers, unless somehow you see that they did it in the third or fourth quarter of a blowout, and that's what I would kind of mark there.
Yeah, that's kind of always one of my gauges too. I try to, especially this early on, you want to see, all right, is this team in a competitive game? Is this somebody they leaned on in critical situations versus getting lost and all right, well, there's a backup receiver that kind of got lucky and produced this week because the starters got pulled early or whatever. So yeah.
All right. Good job with that, Jared. We got you.
So it's funny, going into this, I looked at how deep I thought the wide receiver, I guess you call it classes here for this waiver week and everything. Mm-hmm. I mean, shoot, I had 25 guys written down, but I mentioned how almost every single one of them I could kind of poke holes in, whether it's their upcoming matchup this week or their target share, or I just don't trust the offense in like the case of like Chris Durr just now, right? Like there's so many things I could poke holes in every single one of these guys. The only one that checks off every single one of my boxes is Chase Hendricks, a wide receiver out of Ohio, 25% rostered. Dorian, you should be familiar with him. He terrorized your Scarlet Knights this past week to the tune of 12 targets, 9 receptions, 115 yards. Didn't score a touchdown. That'll fix itself down the line. An incredible 42.9% target share. He has the same quarterback from last year. He is moved from the outside into the slot position, which has been the crucial spot for that Ohio offense the last couple of years. Yes, obviously Tim Albin moved on to Charlotte, but we got Brian Smith as the new head coach there. He was the offensive coordinator under Albin for years. They're running the exact same system, and they know how to do it extremely well. They got a veteran running back, veteran quarterback, veteran wide receiver. I trust that Ohio is going to be able to put up points in basically almost every matchup. Again, I given the fact they were able to put up points on Rutgers last week, I trust they can put up some points on West Virginia this week. I don't love the idea of them putting up points on Ohio State, but it definitely gave me a lot more confidence that I can go ahead and grab a wide receiver here that, again, like I said, checks all of my boxes here. And I'll probably wait until the very end of the draft to draft my second guy.
Yeah, no, that's a great one. And again, 2 of the next 3 matchups are great for him. After they got West Virginia, then Ohio State, as you mentioned. But following that, they've got Gardner Webb.
And then Mac.
Yeah, then the Mac. So he's a guy that is kind of, I guess he stayed under 30 for drafts just because he was a total unknown as far as his name. But those paying attention, Jared, I know you've been high on him the entire offseason. Took a note on that and picked him up in a couple of leagues based on kind of what you exposed me to as far as him playing that critical, specific wide receiver position in that offense, which when we saw each other at the Kings Classic, I mentioned to you, that's something I didn't do much of in the past, is target like the outside guy or the slot guy in specific coaches' offenses. But you and the guys at C2C do a great job of kind of pinpointing which specific wide receiver role is targeted the most in a certain offensive coordinator's system, which is something I'm starting to pay more attention to. And he's definitely the guy in Ohio that's going to continue to get those targets. So. All right, Willie, since you were out after the game at Oklahoma and needed the most time, karma's on your side. You went last. You had the most time to study in between. Now you get to go back to back.
I'm not sure about all the time to study, but some interesting wide receivers there. I did like Hendricks, did look at him, but we're going to change it up. Let's see. You guys are probably going to save these for last, but I like I'm going to go with Miller Moss. He is 29% rostered.
Oh, that's surprising.
They get JMU this week. He had a semi-slow start. He only had 223 yards and 1 touchdown. Also did have 1 on the ground, but like Jared was saying, these offenses are going to be a little bit slow to start. But they do have the bye week in week 3, so we should see a lot of Miller Moss, and hoping that he can show us what he's probably going to give for the rest of the season.
Okay. Yeah, that's. I mean, that offense is one that I looked incredible yesterday. Probably one of the best all-around offenses, I would say, that I saw. They didn't take their time running up a big lead, so I'm not sure when they pulled Moss. I wasn't watching that closely, but that was one of those games that I think was 40 something to 3 or 7 by the half, if I'm not mistaken. He did look he looked good though in the couple of quarters that he played.
Yeah, and then so tempted to go receiver, but like Jared said, there's plenty to go around, so won't be doing that. Man, this is it's a little tough, to be honest. Let's see. I'm gonna go a guy here that Jeremy and I, we talked about him when we were drafting, and another guy that's 29% rostered, very much on the edge. So if you don't get him now, then you wouldn't do it. But we're gonna go running back Roman Hemby from Indiana. So they get Kennesaw State this week. He had 111 yards and a touchdown against Old Dominion. And I really wanted to pick him up in a few leagues. I think I got sniped in our super starters, if I'm not mistaken. But do like what Hindi always puts on tape, so we'll go.
Yeah, that's interesting. Since he didn't get the touchdown, he is a little further down the list with 13 points this week. I hadn't paid attention to that box score. I didn't realize he did have 23 carries, and so there was some question about kind of how the carries would be distributed in Indiana. So that's he's definitely got the volume there in week one. So hopefully he can get a few touchdowns to go along with that follow up. We know he can catch the ball because that's what he did a lot of in Maryland. So yeah, he wasn't on my radar as a waiver pick. I also assumed he was another guy that might be over, but I had no idea he had the 23 carries. So it'd be interesting to see if he keeps that up.
If I may make a quick comment here on Hemby and everything, obviously great performance this past week against Old Dominion. Again, 23 carries sounds great until you see that they ran the ball 56 times, and that's a carry share about 41% there. Now that's enough in a lot of weeks to get you some good CFF production there. But what I have noticed with Indiana is that they don't just run a committee; they run something worse, and that's a hot hand approach.
Less predictable.
Far less predictable even than a committee. Like a committee, you kind of know the split, and you know that if you expect them to run the ball a lot, you can kind of still take that 41% share and say like, okay, that's still a good 20 carries that he could end up getting, right? But this could be a scenario where, it's Hemby this week, it could be BB next week, it could be Kalen Black the next week, right? Like they got 3 really good backs there at Indiana, and so I'm a little questioning of that.
Of the three though, I like Hemby. That's just my personal opinion, but that's just where I stand on that.
Well,
I totally agree. I totally agree with that, but I'm just saying of the 3, as far as track record is concerned, I'm going with Hemby.
And for those who have not tuned in the past, it would not be a CFF list waiver watch draft if Jared and Willie B did not have some contention at some point or some disagreement in a pick at some point. So there we go. There we have it. We've got it all up in the air now. So, but with that, Jared, let's see if you make a pick that Willie B could criticize.
Yeah. So again, I normally try to come in here with, we draft 8 running backs, so I try to have 8 running backs ready to go. I'll be real, there's only 7 that I really like this week because a lot of them get filtered out because of their matchups this week. Like one that comes to mind, we talked about before the show, like Tay Meadows looked great last week. He's got Clemson this week. Ain't no way I'm drafting him in a format like this. So I think now is the time for me to start attacking running back. And I'll be real, like whatever, I'll say. I'll probably hit running back with my next 2 picks here just to kind of get it out of the way before I get stuck here. I'm going to go Miles Montgomery out of UCF going up against North Carolina A&T. Boy, that UCF offense did not look great last week. You know who did look pretty solid? Miles Montgomery, pretty much throughout the whole game. And I think that he's going to be in for a better week this week. You're facing North Carolina A&T, which is a step down in competition even from Jacksonville State last week. It helped a ton, oh my God, when they finally made the switch from Cam Fancher to Taven Jackson. I don't know what those coaches were seeing in that practice that made them think that starting Cam Fancher over Jackson was a good idea, but you saw an immediate improvement, right? Fancher played half that game, and he had 32 yards passing. Jackson comes in, plays half the game. He finishes the game with 282 yards passing. That additional passing game is going to out. Can you also hear me?
Yeah. Yes. Okay, cool. Yeah, we're listening.
Sorry. My screen's being a little weird right now because I'm trying to look up stats. Anyway, what was I saying? The improvement from Jackson from Fancher was obvious, and I think that improvement in the passing game is actually going to open things up a little bit for Montgomery. Playing a game like this against an FCS opponent, I could see Montgomery ripping off 1 or 2 big runs in this game for touchdowns.
Yeah. And again, that was another. This is the fun of week 1. It wasn't clear how Montgomery and Nixon were going to split carries, and it seemed to be one of the more obvious cases of Montgomery is the clear running back 1. When it comes to how it will be divided between him and Nixon specifically. So that was another question answered that seemed clear to me after.
He's got and obviously he has a little bit of that burst too for that that 64 yard reception that he tacked on. So yeah, I like that.
Yep. All right, Dorian, back to you.
All right. So I am gonna go with running back this time around. I'm going to go with Lucky Sutton out of San Diego State. I'm just doing some digging because for me, whenever, I'm looking at the running backs, I really just, like everyone else, really just try to find somebody who, is going to get most of the workload. Mm-hmm. Once again, week 1, it's always a little tricky, game flow. Obviously, you just want to teams want to see how guys look out there on the field. But based on, just looking at how things went in that game for him, he had 22 carries in a blowout game. I'd like to think, it's a great – and then I think the next highest there's maybe 3 different rushers with 7 attempts. One of them was a quarterback, and then 2 other running backs. Not sure when he got pulled, but, he also had 2 touchdowns as well. And then another good note is Washington State had a close one with Idaho, and it was 13-10. And in that game, they allowed a 188, about like 4.1 per carry. So it's not anything maybe Washington State should be fully ashamed of, but at the same time, still a FCS opponent. Washington State is Washington State. So
yeah, they're falling quickly into group of 5 status.
Yeah, it's right.
Sure.
Yeah, it's just crazy. Yeah, just how everything's gone. But yeah, I think it's a good, if you're in need and you're looking for somebody to really take a shot on. I think you'd be in a good spot.
Yeah.
So.
All right. Well, that's back-to-back picks of guys that I had on my list. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Similar to Jared, I did find 8. That was the target. You look for 8 because at least 8 have to be taken. Or if you can get 6 or 7, you hope you found somebody that other people haven't found. But Himby, I didn't have on the list, but I did have Montgomery and Sutton. But number 1 on my list is still there. I was hoping you guys didn't take him. It's a guy that I was hoping, based on history, was going to work out, and it seems like it will. I'm taking Dominique Richardson at Tulsa. He's only, as of last night, 4% rostered, largely because he so quietly made the move to Tulsa after originally committing to New Mexico State. I believe it was New Mexico State, not New Mexico. But this is after, he spent some time at the Power 4 or 5 schools. He started Oklahoma State, had a couple of 500-yard rushing seasons and 20-plus catch seasons, moved to Baylor. In both situations, he was just beat out by guys who ended up being outstanding freshmen, which was Ollie Gordon at Oklahoma State, and then last year with Washington at Baylor. So I think he quickly saw the writing on the wall in both situations, made the move. I think he's exactly where he needs to be to thrive. He's an Oklahoma kid. He's in Tulsa. Seems like he's comfortable. But it was something in the offseason people weren't willing to take a chance on because there was just absolutely zero news coming out of Tulsa on whether or not he had really secured that spot. The week he had makes it seem like he has. 20 carries, 142 yards, and a touchdown. He's got New Mexico State this weekend, where he originally committed to when he left Baylor. Then he's got Navy and Oklahoma State. So he's actually playing 2 of the 3 schools he left here coming up. But most importantly, he's playing New Mexico State this week, and it seems like he is the clear running back 1, which I was suspecting in the offseason. He was our running back 50, so he would have been worth the gamble. Now you got to go get him, and I'm happy to have him here. There you go. Now, Dorian, we get to come back to you.
All right. So I have Ahmad Hardy. Take pride in being pretty early on him last year, so I was pretty locked into watching the Missouri game this past Thursday. Got to watch Bo Pribula. Not sure.
How do you say it, Jared?
Pribula,
Dorian.
Pribula.
Yeah.
So I got a chance to watch him in action. And not gonna lie, part of it, sometimes, you gotta, for me personally, sometimes you go off numbers, sometimes you go off just, watching the game and maybe a combination of both. I'm gonna go ahead and take a chance on them this week. I know they play Kansas, which is kind of your, they're still it could be a interesting game, tough game. They could come out and, all the pieces on their offense could show up and Missouri could look great. But I have faith in Bo because he's just got that. He just has that ability. I feel like he's just going to make plays. He's gonna get loose if he needs to. I think it's still kind of the jury's still out on whether or not he'll be a great thrower, consistent thrower. But if he has to use his legs, he will. And watching him, obviously inferior opponent this past week, but he's kind of a defense's worst nightmare. When I talk to guys that I play with, the guys, quarterbacks that he playing against the most were guys like him, guys that are kind of
run.
Yeah, it could take off and run, and make your life miserable, especially as a D lineman. So I'm going with him. I'm going with Bo.
Yeah, the former Penn State. I don't remember if he was a 5-star, but he was one of the more highly touted quarterbacks that Penn State brought in. And
yeah, it kind of made the headlines for transferring. I think before the playoffs or during.
Last year, decided to leave before the season ended for sure.
Yep.
So, all right, I like it. Good. Yeah, I didn't know he was such a good runner, but it looks like from the stats, that's the case. All right.
Quick comment. Again, I can't find an actual line, but I agree with you, Dorian, in the fact that I do think that Missouri-Kansas matchup, as much as people might want to try to avoid like P4 versus Power 4 matchups early on, like I can absolutely see, like I can't find an official over-under on that game quite yet, but I wouldn't be shocked at all if it was in like the low 60s. I think both of those teams could end up putting 30 points up each.
Yeah, and that's a good point, Jared. Like, I'm in the camp that, Power 4 versus FCS is a bigger nightmare for me than a P4 versus P4 because you almost want to get into the shootout situations. If you're playing a great defense, that's one thing, but I don't think there's a reason to be scared of Kansas defense in this situation. Like, you want to, if you've got a guy on a good offense, you want him going against the school that has a good offense also, so that they're just getting into that shootout and going back and forth. That's exactly what you want.
Well, especially with a dual threat quarterback like Pribula, right? They're going to ask him to play hero ball. If they fall behind in that game, there's going to be a point where they're going to tell Pribula, "Hey, look for your pass. If it's not there, take off and run."
Right.
And that's the ultimate dream of any CFF player with quarterback. So good pick up there, Dorian.
Yeah, thank you.
Let's see. It's only Jared and I that need quarterbacks. Let's see if he's afraid I'll take his pick and go quarterback also.
No, I've got two quarterbacks that I am more than happy with, so I'm actually going to hold off on that.
Okay.
Is it my turn? Am I up now?
It is your turn, yes.
All right, cool. I'm going to grab my second running back here. I'm going to take Rashad Dubinion out of Appalachian State.
Yep.
Going up against Lindenwood this week. Let's see. He is rostered in 11% of leagues. We got the news right before the season that Kanye Roberts went down and he is out for the season. There was a lot of talk about him and Dubinion splitting workload going into the season. So a lot of people didn't really go after Dubinion too much, and I totally understand that. But now with Roberts out of the picture, I was curious. I even DM'd a couple people who are asking me for like RB sleepers right before the season. I'm like, I'm kind of interested in Dubinion there at Appalachian State. He's worked with the head coach before, back during his time at Arkansas, right? There's a history there already. He is a Power 4 back that, he wasn't bad when he's at Arkansas by any stretch of the imagination. So he clearly does translate pretty well down here to the Sun Belt level. And without Roberts there, he's clearly the main guy. 22 rushing attempts, 111 yards, and a touchdown yesterday. And here's the kicker. Among all the running backs that I will be talking about today on my show and everything, he had the most targets, 6 targets, 5 receptions, 31 yards. That's a really solid floor receiving. Now, again, will he get that every single week? Probably not. But considering the rest of these guys that I'll be talking about are, 1, 2, 3, targets each, I'm willing to bet on Dubinion kind of continuing to get that extra workload, especially against an opponent like Lindenwood. If they were able to run all over Charlotte last week, I think they'll be just fine against Lindenwood.
Yeah, and I think that's a situation where you don't necessarily have to worry about if they pull him too soon, because as I've heard you say, if you're getting pulled too soon, it means your team has scored a lot of points, and if it's the right guy on that team, it's probably your guy that's gotten those points. So, yeah, there's
a workhorse running back in that scenario is usually a good bet to at least score 1 or 2 of those touchdowns to put them in that scenario.
Yeah, this would be one of those guys you could probably take a chance on a 2+ TD game on the websites that allow you to make such bets.
Potentially.
Yeah. All right, Dorian. Willie B. You're here. You get one pick this time, and then it'll come back to me.
This is a guy. Maybe he's finally playing up to his potential, but we're going to snag him here, and that's going to be Michael Trigg.
Oh yeah.
He had 16 targets, 7
Yep.
for 99. He had a score. I honestly, I think I saw him drop one. Maybe he,
You did.
redeemed himself and got one.
You saw him drop a couple, but he still got enough
Yeah.
targets to
Okay.
keep him moving.
So yeah. So he should have a few more chances, a few more opportunities to get in the end zone. They play
Yep.
at SMU this week. So we're going to go Michael Trigg at tight end. He is 24% rostered. But yeah, those 16 targets, those pop out.
All right. I
So
thought I saw 28, but that's still under the number that needs to happen. You're going against your usual grain here, Willie. Typically, you pride yourself on finding those 0 to 5% guys, but I see you're going with the heavier percentage guys here today.
well, so like I said, we went to live game and usually try to get that out early in the season. So
Right.
once the season goes on, it'll be all day, all night.
In front of the TV.
That's
Yeah.
when you'll get those single digit guys showing up.
All right. I'll try to make up for some of that here with
Yeah.
my picks because all I did was sit in front of the TV yesterday. You did not go to the Georgia game, right, Jared?
I did not.
All right. Well, I had that offer to you to get you the ticket in the Marshall section. Marshall did
Oh,
win.
Jared, come on.
Marshall did win by covering the spread, though, if I'm not mistaken.
They did by half a point, and I told my friends ahead of time. I was
You
just
did.
like, Kirby's
You did.
0-13 against when you have a spread that big. So I'm
Right.
just like,
Yeah, it was a 39-point spread.
might as well
and,
get a little extra money on the side. I'm telling all my friends.
Exactly, and I think they tied exactly on the nose the over/under of 52, which was crazy.
Oh, really? That's hilarious.
Yeah,
Vegas
yeah.
nailed the game, I guess.
They definitely did. But look, at least Marshall got on the scoreboard and didn't get shut out. We'll say that. So,
Yep.
all right, back to me. Jared's mentioned having two quarterbacks. So I'm going to go a little. I know who I want, but I'm going to take a chance he doesn't take my guy. I think I'm going to jump on the tight end that I had no information about, that blew me away with his targets and his catches, and seems to have a glorious matchup this week. And that's Dorian Thomas from New Mexico, who led all tight ends with 29.1 points, which came from 10 catches, 71 yards, and 2 touchdowns. Again, he's a 0% guy. So there you go, Willie. Since we just talked about it, let me take the 0% rostered Dorian Thomas out of New Mexico. I can't tell you anything about him except for his numbers, but in this case, I'm hoping the numbers don't lie. Jared, you can correct me if I'm wrong on this one.
Nope. He was one of my top tight ends for this. So good pick.
Yep. And again, this is the fun of college fantasy. There are guys that will emerge that you've never heard of from schools like New Mexico that could end up being the darling for the season, or he could disappear. But I think in this case, again, basing it on the targets, it doesn't seem to be a fluke. I think he's going to be a guy that seems to be a key in their pass game there in New Mexico.
Yeah, targets an opponent. I mean, everything kind of lines up. It's like, all right, you got to
Right. Why not
just
take a
prove
chance?
you wrong at this point. Yeah, if
Yeah.
you have this
He's-
kind of game.
He's not a blue chip talent. I just looked at his 247 page and everything. He's a former 3-star tight end, was at Arizona, so it just didn't
Okay.
work out really there. So, but going to New Mexico, that roster was completely pillaged
Right.
last year after Bronco Mendenhall left. So again, a lot of opportunity there. Seems to be taking good advantage of it.
Yeah, and I like hearing that he came from Arizona. That means there was, and even a 3-star. That shows there's some upside there, and that athletically he's probably what you need him to be to not be the fluky guy, in the fantasy league.
For sure.
All right, Willie or Dorian, back to you.
Yeah, I was just doing some quick search on this guy. I mean, I didn't. I may be kicking myself a little bit because I'll go back, and if I could go back and maybe pull back the dirt pick, because I don't know. I don't know how I feel about going all in on Wyoming. Wyoming, but I don't know, Jared kind of inspired me with the looking at the rush share, and right now the current leader, if I'm reading correctly, based on players' percentage of teams' rush attempts, is Sam Scott,
Yeah,
Wyoming.
yeah.
He is he's 19% rostered.
Yeah, double up on him. Go ahead, no problem.
Yeah,
There you
I mean, if you're gonna go, FBS once again, FBS versus FCS. We're looking at guys that could, help you right away. Like I just mentioned, Sam Scott, 29 rush attempts last week, 74% of the team's carries. And once again, in a close game, like in a game tightly contested, I think the final score was 10-0 against Akron. So, and then with those, was able to get 132 yards on those attempts. So, if you're looking at production and being able to generate points, that's a clear cut. And in this day and age, just the landscape of football, pro or college, being able to get you a guy that can, demand that much is prized possession. So let's go with Sam's.
That's a good one.
That was so wild for me watching that workload he was getting, because all the talk was like it was going to be him and Kelman were going to split carries this year. And I'm like, well, given what we saw last year, that's probably what's going to happen again this year. Then he comes out with almost 30 carries. And I'm like, all right, well, thanks for just completely misleading everybody on this. I wish I invested in him a little bit more, because at one point I was like, oh, Sam Scott's like the best running back they got coming back and everything.
Right.
Then I started hearing more about Kelman. I'm like, oh, well, I guess they're going to go committee again this year. Sometimes I just got to trust my own gut sometimes, I guess.
Dorian, do you have a note there? What class is he? What year is he? Do we know?
I am seeing on Fantrax, I'm saying senior.
That means
he's been around a while.
Yeah. Okay. I couldn't recall if he was a 1 or 2 year guy, but yeah. So he's
just
not maybe dynasty, but unless you just have a really serious hole to fill. But I was curious about that. Since he was 5% rostered, I thought maybe there'd be a chance for some dynasty guys to get him. They might still be able to if they really need him. Okay. All right, Jared. To you.
All right, so Willie B took my boy at tight end, Michael Trigg. He's been my boy for years.
Former Georgia guy.
No, he's not. I just liked him a lot at Ole Miss, and then he just didn't do anything.
Why am I
USC is where he started, and then he went to Ole Miss, and now he's at Baylor.
I don't know. I'm thinking of another
SEC wires crossed.
Georgia tight end that transferred that had troubles or something. I don't know. All right, never mind.
No. We haven't had, actually, surprisingly, we have not had any tight ends transfer out of our room recently, even though it's just absolutely loaded.
Gotcha.
But Trigg's my boy in terms of talent. In terms of system, there is nobody better that I love to target than Jay Norvell tight ends.
Okay.
And this past week, we got a pretty clear answer as to where we're going with that. And Jackson Warren, who got a lot of hype coming in as a freshman last year before he tore his ACL right before the season, he's back, and he looks easily the best receiving option for this Colorado State offense this year. None of the wide receivers are stepping up, and he looked really good against a solid Power 4 defense yesterday. He ended the day with, let me see if I can find it real quick. I did not write it down, but I think it was somewhere around like 8 targets, 79 yards, and a touchdown.
Yeah, I think it was 11. Might have
11 targets.
11, geez,
11
targets,
8
receptions.
Even better.
I'm just completely off. I made that up the number. Regardless, it's a big number, and he's clearly the best receiving option for this Colorado State offense that should pass the ball a ton. I'm gonna take shots on tight ends like that every single day of the week. Yes, there's gonna be some duds. There always is with tight ends, right? But I don't know. Warren to me has the upside of being a top 3, top 5 tight end in all of fantasy by the end of the year if he keeps doing what he's doing.
Agreed. Yeah, and he did have a huge amount of hype last year based on the connection with Jay Norvell and the tight ends and his systems in his past, and didn't make it past game 1, unfortunately. So good for him making a comeback, and totally agree.
I was going to say, and I think he's, in terms of guys, if you're looking at the guys that perform well this week, I feel like he's in the best position to give you sustained success.
Mm-hmm.
He's got the quarterback, Fowler, has been there, Fowler, Nikowski, or
Nicolosi, or
and then, like you said, Norvell's been there, systems in place, he's got
a guy like Trigg, right? There's other options on that offense between Cameron, obviously Cole Wilson we talked about earlier. Ashton Hawkins will eventually come along there as well. So I think you will see some up and down production with Trigg a little bit. Dorian Thomas, complete unknown, like JMO said. You're playing for upside if you go with Thomas there. He could end up being great. He could also end up with 2 targets next week, and we never see a 14-target game from him ever again. Versus Warren, like you said, Dorian, there's history with this system. We know for a fact that Warren's a complete athletic freak, and that he could easily just continue to be the best option for them week in and week out.
Yep. Okay, good. It's really surprising he stayed under 10% rostered just based on the hype he had last year. But I guess when you're coming off a serious injury, it just shows you how skeptical people are that you'll make it back. So
it also didn't help that Rocky Beers was coming in, and he was getting some talk as well.
Right. Yep. All right, Willie.
I'm gonna take a guy here that if we don't take him now, it probably won't happen later on just because of matchups and
Hmm.
their schedule going forward. But he had 59 yards. I'm going to say he's going to have that in the first quarter this week when they play. I believe it's going to be Southern Illinois, if I'm not mistaken. That's Devin Mockabee from Purdue. He had 14 carries for 59 yards and a score. Super quick. He did have a fumble, but he can catch out of the backfield. But I expect him to get all of those numbers in the first quarter this week against Southern Illinois. He's 17% rostered, but they do have USC and then Notre Dame. But in the middle of that season, it gets a little tougher. So if looking for somebody early, that's one that I would touch on. But
Yeah,
I do like his matchup this week for sure.
yeah, that's interesting, and that would be the most clear pick we've had of the difference in how we do the waiver draft versus how other people recommend pickups, because he's got two treacherous games potentially after this versus Notre Dame and USC. But for this week and this week alone, Willie B's probably right on point. Recommending Mockabee, and then it's up to you to look at his schedule following Notre Dame and USC and seeing how he handles those. But maybe you can grab him and stash him after this week also. But if you need somebody for next week, yeah, I think that's a good one, Willie. That I overlooked. But yeah, those weeks after are going to be interesting to see if he can keep anything up against a really good, what should be, at least with Notre Dame, a really good defense, and then USC just probably a better team overall. But we'll
Right.
find out. Yep. Okay. All right. Back to me. Running back or receiver? Well, running back I don't have to worry about. So let's fill this other receiver spot. I think this is a tough choice. I will say this: Bo Sparks had 4 touchdowns. I'm not touching him. I just don't. I don't know, Jared. Can I just ask you: Is Bo Sparks going to be on your trap list this week?
He won't be on my trap list. I actually am going to put him as a play because, again, the system does tend to target that slot wide receiver. Obviously, again, I will mention the touchdown regression,
Yep.
but him starting off with 4 touchdowns this week doesn't preclude him from continuing to score touchdowns week in and week out. That slot position with
Yeah.
GJ Kinney has been kind of the spot that they have targeted mostly over the last couple of years. They
Yeah.
got a good matchup this week. I don't see any reason why you wouldn't draft him, but obviously, again, there's so many good receivers. I don't blame you for also avoiding him at the same time.
Yeah, I'm going to avoid him for that reason. I think they could end up kind of mixing up who the prime target is there. Um, I liked Hunter at Nebraska, so I'm choosing between him. But I think because he's had 2 good weeks putting up numbers, it's a little tougher on the matchup side. UNLV's playing UCLA, but I'm going to go with Jaden Bradley, who surprisingly, you know, didn't get picked up in a lot of places after the week 0 game, where he had a good performance. But in 2 games, he's averaging 21.8 points. He's had 6 catches and 125 plus yards in both games. That's enough for me to realize, they're going to keep looking for him. Against UCLA, somebody's going to have to catch a few passes no matter what. I expect him to at least, get another 4 or 5 or 6. I'm going to go Jaden Bradley, wide receiver from UNLV, rostered on 10%. Even though he's playing UCLA, I like that he's done it 2 weeks in a row.
I think a lot of people avoided him after week 0 because, again, if you look at the history of Dan Mullen's system, you don't really tend to see a lot of high upside wide receivers for CFF. I think probably the only one you can think of is Kadarius Toney in recent memory. And
Right.
so I think people saw that performance in week 1 and they said, okay, this is probably a fluke. But now we got, like you said, we got 2 weeks in a row of this. You got a guy here that is earning a 29.5% target share. I usually like to target guys with 25% plus, at least in the first couple of weeks. He's getting high value targets. His ADOT's the highest among the team. And like you said, he doesn't need a ton of targets every single week to get you what he needs. I think over the last couple of weeks, he's had 6 and 7 targets in each game. But when he's getting targeted, 15, 20 yards down the field every single time,
Right.
it makes up for it. So I like the pick, J-Mill.
All right. Thank you. Appreciate that. Dorian, let's see if you can get equal compliments from Jared with your pick. Well, yeah, you don't. I'm going to just tell you, you don't have to go tight end till the end now because you're the only one left.
Yeah, it's fine. I think
Okay.
just it was on my brain after you guys did it, so I'm going to go ahead and go with Dylan Wade. It's somebody me and
I like it.
Dad had talked about.
I'm
He
Dad.
was kind of being he was somebody that we both felt like was kind of being overlooked throughout the off season, and quiet as like didn't see many write ups, not many updates on him, and came out, had a solid game for a tight end, 6 targets, had a touchdown, 54 yards, and last year at Maryland, once again the bars. It's tough with tight ends and it's kind of up and down, but I think combination of him, being somebody that is proven, and then also they're playing, North Carolina A&T as we mentioned before.
Right.
I think he's a safe bet if you're in a situation where everybody put in for the guys that we mentioned, and you're looking for somebody that's maybe off the radar. I think this is a guy you could plug and play for this coming week. So.
Yeah, and we did have several conversations in the off season about how we just thought people were overlooking him. I think it is a case where like they just didn't have enough camp reports that directly said he's a standout or he's going to be the tight end one without a doubt. But our opinion was, look, he did decent enough in the Big Ten. No, I don't think anybody disagrees. It's a step down, probably moving to the Big 12, so he should at least do as good as last year. And, he was respectable last year. He wasn't spectacular, but he was respectable. So there was that chance for him to upgrade, the ability that he had. So
and like the other guys available, they kind of have the weird, like outside the guys that you guys mentioned, they kind of have the weird, 3 catches, 2 touchdowns, 20 yards. Like, it's a little tougher to rely on that, kind of output versus a guy like Dylan Wade, who, okay, this is 6 targets. Yes, he had a touchdown, but he even proved last year at Maryland that he could play. So,
all right,
yeah,
I like it. I don't like where you took him because you could have grabbed your last receiver there, but that's okay. We like that.
I know.
I think what you really were doing was buying yourself more time to make your final receiver pick. If I'm being honest.
I mean, there's a lot of really good options at wide receiver. Like, I thought about it as well, where I'm like, I am happy with my last 2 quarterback picks. So if I had a favorite wide receiver to grab, like that's where I would go with this pick. But I look at the list of guys that I have here, which by the way, I had 12 wide receivers listed here. Only one of them has been, or no, excuse me, 2 of them have been taken.
Interesting. Okay.
So like, I still have a lot of guys that I could pick between. So I think I am going to take my quarterback here.
Okay.
And J Mill, you're talking about let's not be afraid of quote unquote even matchups here. Yep. We will shoot for the shootout. I'm going to go Brad Jackson, quarterback out of Texas State here, rostered on 20% of leagues. He's got UTSA this week. This past week, 26 pass attempts, 18 completions, 214 yards, 4 touchdowns passing. That's obviously great. We also got 10 rushing attempts for 48 yards there as well. I don't think we have seen even close to the ceiling that Jackson can provide. His rushing ability is easily one of the best in the Sun Belt, and we didn't even see that much of it this past weekend, only 48 rushing yards. He's got a 100-yard rushing upside any week, and you give me in a matchup that where both of these teams I think could easily clear into the 30-point range, give me that all day long. I will happily take Brad Jackson here as my quarterback.
And he's a freshman.
Yeah. Redshirt freshman, I believe.
All right. Eyeing him for our dynasty.
What was that, Dorian?
I'm maybe a pickup put in our league for him.
Oh, okay.
In the home league? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, you don't want to say those out. So they'll say those out loud, but that's okay.
All right, Willie.
I'm gonna obviously go. Yeah, I'm obviously gonna go wide receiver here.
Yeah.
I had a couple.
You got fullback.
Yeah. We're gonna go Marquise Johnson from Missouri. He had 5 for 134 and a touchdown. They get Kansas this week, who Fantrax has them a little bit tougher against the pass, but I did like what I saw from Missouri, and I think those targets are gonna take an uptick this week. So Marquise Johnson. He's 14% rostered,
Okay.
and I did that 26 yards of catch. I like that. So Marquise
Yeah,
Johnson.
I'm looking through my
High value
phone.
targets, man. That's what
I
he's
just want
getting.
to give a shout out to one of our followers on Twitter. We had a post this week where, we said, who's your guy that's way off the radar, like 0 to 2% drafted, but you've taken because you just have a feeling. And JT Brew loudly and proudly proclaimed that Marquise Johnson would be the guy to have the big season at Missouri. And so far, after 1 week, he's looking like he might be right there. And he's got the Willie B backing now as he drafts him in the
Okay.
draft. So, shout out
No,
to JT Brew.
he looked. I have, like I mentioned before, I have Hardy and I have Coleman on my team, and I have Bo, and so I was pretty locked into that game, and he looked really impressive.
Cool. Thank you. Appreciate it.
All
J-Mill,
right.
or is this is that right?
Yep, it's me.
Or are we going to Jared again?
Yeah, it looks like I can actually give you guys both of mine because both positions are taken. So let me just fill in my roster here. I'm actually debating, again, instead of spending a lot of time at the end with extras that we would have picked up, I'm kind of debating between, Mensa from Duke, who's 26% rostered, going against Illinois, looked fantastic with 389 yards and 3 touchdowns. But I think, for the benefit of those who need to dig deeper, I'll go with AJ Swan, who's only 5% rostered at App State. He's playing Lindenwood, which I'm a little hesitant to taking because he's playing that type of an FCS team that, because Dubinion might get the touchdowns, it may not swing his way. But I think I just personally want to get the shout out in there to AJ Swan, who, was one of my gut feeling guys in the preseason. Towards the end, they were claiming it was a battle and he was, still fighting for the spot, but seemed to have solidified it with, 368 yards and 3 touchdowns this week and looked really good in doing so. The former Vanderbilt quarterback that moved down to the group of 5, I think he's found a home where he can dominate this season in the Sun Belt. So I like AJ Swan this week against Lindenwood, even though Dubinion might be a little bit of a touchdown vulture there on the running game.
Not to spend too much time on this, how are you guys viewing this App State offense moving forward? Because I found it extremely interesting.
Yeah.
They threw the ball 46 times in a blowout.
Mm-hmm.
Like, a lot of times you see that stat line when, you're in a shootout or you're playing from behind and everything. They didn't stop throwing the ball. They ran a ton of plays. I think I looked it up. I think they ran the 3rd most plays on offense this past weekend. And so that's part of the reason why I'm a little hesitant on a guy like, Jaden Barnes is a wide receiver that a lot of people are, taking a look at this week for waiver wires and everything. But he only had like 17% target share. If they don't do that week in and week out, those target numbers could definitely drop a lot, and he doesn't turn into, a weekly option at the waiver wire position. But do you guys think that, that's what we should expect from App State every single week, is running, 80 plus plays every single week?
I don't think it's something. I think it's something, if you're doing it once, you're not going to necessarily. I don't know if they can get 80 plays in a week, but I think, it seems like a shift in the style that they want to play with. I think that's probably going to be.
It's a lot more high tempo than what we've seen from App State.
Right. I mean, it was 27-3. I mean, in the third. I mean, but that to me is not that huge of a blowout. So I can kind of understand it if you're trying to get a feel of what your offense, what you want it to be. So I mean, maybe that's a little bit part of it. But like I said, early in the season, we have to have maybe 2 more weeks before we fully see what offenses are going to be, especially when they're making these changes, that we're not used to seeing from teams like this.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, again, and I would just say that, I don't think that's the kind of thing that happens by accident. I think it's a system change that they were probably pushing to make their new style. And I don't know that you'll know so much after Lindenwood if that's the case too, but I guess if they're running up tempo, again, that won't change. So, we'll find out. I tell you, the week after, week 3, should be a fun game against Southern Miss too. That should be another reason to take AJ Swan to keep for a couple weeks. Should be a good turnout against Southern Miss there. But I just liked what I saw overall. I mean, in the offseason, I had the confidence that Aguiar was great in that system. Why can't AJ Swan be that good at least? And I was happy to see, like, he kind of had an Aguiar type performance, from his App State days, and actually even better. So I think it's an upgrade there for them. Yeah, and instead of
Now, like I
Avery,
said, I mean, if they
go ahead.
if they do that this week, though, in what should be what the true blowout sense should be, if they still have 50 pass attempts to 30 rushes, and the score is 50-3, then it's like, okay, what are you really doing? But
Then you know so. Yeah.
I just think that it's still a wait and see approach, especially until they get to that bye in week 4. Then I think we'll know. But I honestly think that they're really trying to change what they're doing, and it's going to be a
System,
lot
yeah,
more
a little
pass happy,
flexible.
in my opinion.
Definitely a tempo change. All right. Well, I'm going to push us to get to the end here. Um, Definitely make your necessary comments, but we want to keep it as close to an hour as we can. Everybody's going to wrap up their final pick here. I'll let you go, Dorian, with that receiver. You've had plenty of time now to find.
All right. I'm gonna go. So, looking at the scores from this past week, pretty jarring to see Northwestern lose to Tulane 23-3. On paper, a Big Ten team versus an American team, and just looking at guys that once again just kind of I'm similar to Jared. I like finding those guys that are kind of controlling the target share, and his name is sorry, just lost it. Omari Hayes
Oh yeah.
in that game had 9 catches for 74 yards. Similar thought process to Chase Hendricks. There's a lot of different things. They played Northwestern, so naturally, maybe from a game plan standpoint, didn't call for a lot of passing and the way the game went. I think playing a team like South Alabama, they may find themselves in more throwing situations. But either way, nonetheless, Omari Hayes had 9 catches for 74 yards. The next best receiver had 3 for 47, and that was a tight end. No other wide receiver had more than 1 catch. So I would like to think, if there's a guy you're gonna go after, purely for like, all right, this is the guy reasons. This is the guy. So not 100% schooled on their offense. I was a big Mensa fan last year, and plucked him in our dynasty league last year. But he kind of was up and down even at Tulane last year. So maybe proceed with a little bit of caution. There are a lot of guys available, a lot of options. But once again, if you're kind of in the
Good battle,
weeds
though.
and
Yeah, it's a good
yeah,
matchup in terms of what we were saying before, where there could be a lot of back and forth. South Alabama's always had
right,
a productive offense. They're going to put up points even if it's against Tulane. Major Applewhite systems have proven to be good, and so I think that's that matchup we were talking about earlier that you really want to get yourself into, and you shouldn't be afraid of them playing an equal opponent in this case, and it's a nice one. The other thing that's interesting, I don't know, I didn't watch that game closely, but he caught those 9 passes on 9 targets. So I don't know if the Northwestern DBs were just that bad, or if his hands and the passes were just that good. It's interesting. 9 targets, 9 catches, which is pretty amazing.
yeah. That's one game I got to go back and kind of check some tape of, and I'm very curious. That's
All
just
right.
it's also really bad for Western.
Yeah, they look bad. They do look bad, but we won't dwell on that. Jared, we'll get to your last pick and then get Willie B's here.
Yeah, I feel pretty confident in most of my guys here having a relatively safe floor, so I'll shoot for ceiling with my last pick. It's definitely not a guy that's going to find his way into my top 5 for like my actual waiver show and everything, but screw it, I guess. I'm going to go Carl Chester here, wide receiver out of Southern Miss. Blake Anderson's offense there. We've been talking about it all offseason. We don't have a lot of information as to who the guy is going to be there. Well, we got a pretty good look this past week against an SEC team. Dorian, one of the things I kind of want to bring up with Omari Hayes is even if you're a G5 team, even going against a lower level Power 4 team, your main strategy in that is get your best players the ball. Whenever I see a G5 team go up against a Power 4 team and a certain guy's getting a ton of targets, that means they view that guy as their best opportunity to pull an upset in that game. right? So Amari Hayes, great pick just based on that confidence. Chester here, another one, right? This past week, 10 targets, 6 catches, 53 yards, nothing great, right? But very clearly the game plan was try to get him the ball as much as we can. We know Blake Anderson, wide receiver ones, can be great once they're actually playing their own relative competition. 26.3% target share, very solid there. I'm going to take a shot on him having a great week against Jackson State this week, and we get him as the definitive Blake Anderson wide receiver one this year, and he could have a phenomenal season down the stretch.
Yep.
And
Yeah, it's interesting. They've got
All right, I like
Jackson
it.
State week 2. They've got Jacksonville State week 5. I was a little confused there when I was looking at that schedule on Fantrax. They've got the same abbreviation for Jacksonville State as they do for Jackson State. So interesting. I
that's
like
good.
all four. He's a good long-term pickup for sure. Jackson State, App State, Louisiana Tech, Jacksonville State, and then they've got the SB. The rest of the Sun Belt. To go through. So yeah, that's a good one.
And I was going to say, I like his quarterback. Braxton is, proven like he's a viable quarterback. He went over there with Huff, so I think, that it's only gonna his stock is only gonna grow for sure. Right. Chester.
All right, Willie. Let's.
All right, to clean up this winning squad for the week. We're gonna go Mega Blake from Arkansas. This was a big blowout. They won 52-7 against Alabama A&M. He had 8 targets, 7 receptions, 121 yards in the score. We should get a full game this week out of him as they play Arkansas State at home. Mega Blake, I expect another, this should be a really complete game, so to speak. So let's hope for double-digit targets at least, but I expect another 100-yard game out of him.
Okay, very nice.
14% rostered for those keeping track at home.
All right, good. I'll close us out here, and again, I'll ask you guys for maybe 1 or 2 players after I make my pick to close us out. Since I'm making the last pick, I'll think out loud here about who I'm choosing between, which is 1, Jevin Jackson from UAB going against Navy, but I also like Javion Ducker. We got Jevin and Javon Ducker from Temple, who's going against Howard. They both had carries in the high teens, but it's a tough call, guys. I think I like Jackson though. I think I'm going to go with Jackson versus Navy for UAB. Another one of those questions that might have been answered where we weren't quite sure of the split in that UAB backfield, or if Jackson, was going to be kind of the quote clear running back one. It seems to me that he did get that designation after, transferring in. So I'll go Jevin Jackson or Javon Jackson from UAB, 17% rostered. I like his next 2 weeks, again, by the way, with Navy and Akron. Maybe that's what's swaying me a little bit, even though we're just shooting for the most points for this week. I like that he plays Akron the next week as well, 17% rostered. And again, I will mention Ducker from Temple as the guy who almost made my roster here, going against Howard, but then followed up with Oklahoma and Georgia Tech. So a little bit long-term, tougher schedule for Ducker. Shouldn't have affected my pick here, but, I'll go with Jackson at UAB again. So let's go down the line. Dorian, quickly. Don't have to give too much detail, but maybe you got a guy or two that you want to mention that you didn't take that you would if you had more picks.
Oh, yeah. So one of my favorites from last year had a weird off-season computer quarterback competition at Temple, but Evan Simon, right. I think, way too slept on, in my opinion. I think he's a guy that, he had a lot of great performances last year. Early in the season, kind of faded out a little bit, but I think, he's if you're really in the weeds and you need a quarterback, deep league, crazy league or whatever, take a chance on.
And as mentioned, when I mentioned Ducker from Temple, they're playing Howard this week, so I think the only fear there is if they do want to get McCoy some run, he might get a little more run against Howard than you would expect. Yeah, Simon's looking good. He had some flashes last year, so the 6 touchdowns this week. I don't think you can expect that week to week, but he seems to be a guy that might be able to get you 3 on the reg. So
yeah, he's real quick efficient. Is proven that he could score points last year. Had a 43-point game against Utah State, or depending on your scoring. But he had had a 5 touchdown game. Is a guy that I think worth the investment.
All right, Jared, you got a couple of those wide receivers maybe that
got a lot actually, but I will keep it very brief.
Yep.
Two quarterbacks, Jake Retzlaff going up against South Alabama. Gunnar Stockton going up against Austin Peay this week. He had a really good week last week. I can see him have another good week this week. I got one running back still on my board here with Jalen Dupree going up against Northern Colorado there. Kind of surprised everybody by taking that number one job over Justin Marshall. So I like that matchup there. Wide receivers, I'll just go down the list here. Bo Sparks, Mario Craver, Corey Milliner, Jaden Barnes, Romello Brinson, Cameron Ross, Lewis Vaughn, all guys that I consider taking here. And a tight end, got two really good options still on the board here with Marlon Klein out of Michigan going up against Oklahoma this week. He's kind of taken over a little, not quite Colson Loveland, but very much the tight end one there right now. And then Seydou Traore, one of my guys at Mississippi State, had himself a really nice week one game here. He's going up against, who are they going up against this week? Arizona State.
Yeah,
so.
And then followed by Alcorn State and NIU. I had him on my list as well. I would have taken him if I didn't grab Dorian Thomas. People mentioned in the offseason they lost a lot of receivers, and he was, as a tight end, probably the number one receiver coming back as a tight end, and he's got that wide receiver body really more than he does a tight end body. He's kind of an Evan Ingram type there. Yeah, Willie, let's hear from you, and then we'll close this thing out.
The only one that I probably left on the board was Emmanuel Henderson. Obviously, I didn't like that matchup against Missouri. Is the only reason why I didn't take him. But that was the one that was left for me.
All right, I'm going to go deep here on some guys that you shouldn't take this week, but if you can pick them up and stash them. I had him on rosters a couple years ago at BYU. Really liked him a lot. Wasn't sure why he got stifled there. Miles Davis at Utah State, the hybrid running back receiver, who really is kind of the only guy who is a hybrid like Heidenreich from Navy. He caught 6 passes. I think he had a touchdown doing that. He had multiple carries and got touchdowns rushing. Seems to be a guy that's going to be consistently getting his hands on the ball at Utah State, which is a high-powered offense. However, they're playing Texas A&M this week, and I don't necessarily think you should throw him in there, but he's got Air Force and McNeese State following that. So I think Miles Davis is a good long-term play. Tight end, I'll give you one way off the radar. DeCirio Riles from Eastern Carolina had 8 targets, 6 catches, 49 yards, no touchdowns, but he still got you 10 points without a touchdown as a tight end, which is hard to do. ECU's got a history of getting the tight end the ball. Riles is the new guy that's going to be the one, and he's playing Campbell this week and Coastal Carolina next week. So there's your other extra tight end that you can go grab if you need to. They seem to be tight ends aplenty in the CFF world right now. So with that, Jared, we want everybody to come listen to you Monday mornings, and we know you're doing the live thing on Tuesday, or is it Wednesday for the start set recommendation?
Monday mornings I'll have my waiver wire show. Like you said, I'll cover the waiver wire traps. We'll have our freak out scale for the high draft picks. Got plenty of those to discuss this week, I'm sure. And then obviously just the waiver wire picks from there. And then every Tuesday night we're changing up a bit this season. Rather than a pre-recorded, planned out start-sit show, I'm just going live every Tuesday night, and you guys can come in and ask me start-sit questions. I will show you what Campus of Canton has projected for each of those questions and stuff like that. We interact with you guys in the chat, get your opinions on these things. It's a fun time. Go live for an hour from 8 to 9.
Yeah, and I tuned into the podcast version. That's definitely worth a listen, because it seems like in the course of an hour, you probably talked about 50-plus different guys at all the different positions. You had a good number of people in the chat asking questions live. I'm looking forward to trying to get in there live, this weekend and follow that way. But if you can't catch Jared live on that, he does post that up as a podcast, on Wednesday morning for you to catch, on your commute or, while you're sitting at home, whatever you do in life. But we are going a little long. It's week. We're following up. We're in the midst of week 1 still with 2 games remaining. There are more players than ever to try to grab on the waiver wire. That's why I think it's worth going a little long for this week. It is a contest. We hope Jared scores a lot of points, because our goal is to benefit all of you guys, and we want to bring back the top producers here as far as our guest pickers at the end of this. After about 6 or 7 weeks, we'll have a playoff round or 2. So, Jared, good luck. Dorian, we love seeing you. I'll come downstairs and join you in a minute. And Willie, as usual, great having you on as my partner for year number 5 here, I think we're going into. So good luck, everybody. We hope we've been helpful. Any final sign-off notes there for you, Willie?
Yeah, no, time flies when we're having fun, right? 5 years, that seems crazy to me. But yeah, thank you guys for watching and listening, and good luck this week.
Thanks, y'all.